Hello, and welcome to another podcast sponsored by Hope House in Barrington, Illinois. My name is Ray Pagentini. We'll be speaking with Dr. Mike Swatow shortly. But just to show you how the universe works, I checked my reading for the day this morning, and pardon me while I put on my glasses, and there's always an affirmation, and today was really interesting. It said, your message today is to allow yourself to grieve. When you feel like you've been dealt a rough hand, it's natural and quite common to feel hurt, depression, confusion, isolation, frustration, despair, and anger. You may have lost life as you knew it, or the life you thought you'd have, but you can take this as an opportunity to embrace a new version of a life you never would have dreamed of, a life that could be better than the one you thought you wanted. So, with that thought, I'll pass it on to Mike to start talking about. My first question to Mike today, though, is if you've listened to a couple of the prior podcasts, Mike talks quite a bit about the ability to do the work, but he's never really defined that. So I want to put Mike on the hot seat today and say, Mike, explain in detail about doing the work. What does that mean? What components are there? Physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, psychological? Please talk to us today about doing the work.
That I will do. Good morning, everybody. Before I start, though, earlier in the week, Ray and I talked about not changing the subject matter up, but talking about we don't need to talk about death and despair all the time. Those two words I just picked out of the air. And I know what he means. There's a lot more to this subject area than just grieving and trauma and all that other sort of thing. So I just wanted to start out when I listened to the last podcast, and I never watched the podcast. I just listened to it because I know what's going on in my brain. I have a hard time looking at myself when I talk on those things. So I get more out of it when I just listen. And when I talk about how I was feeling or how I am feeling, all those arrows of my feelings were pointed inward. And I don't think many people thought of me as a person struggling with as many things as I was, because I did tell my story to a few people from way back when. They go, I had no idea. I didn't know your dad committed suicide. I didn't know any of this happened to you, because I would be Mr. Happy. I would be as social as I thought I could be, but I was dying on the inside. And for another, I don't know if we'll have time to get to it today, but that's part of the great imposter syndrome I felt I played a very good role in. But I don't know, I had a lot of fun growing up as well. I just, and without trying to be redundant about all the sad things or all the tragedy or trauma in my life, I'm not whining, I'm just telling my story. And I want people to learn from me, from my story. And before we get into the work, which I do, it's a common phrase. What we do, every podcast and every phone call, every reading I do, I get a lot of joy out of it. Because before we started today, we talked about the Weber golf outing on Monday, this past Monday, and a lot of people came up to us and said how much they enjoyed the podcast and that they're getting something from it, and that really makes me feel good. And that our conversations Monday were not all about death, loss, and sadness. They were about, hey, thanks for saying that, because I know people think what we say, and for whatever reason they don't, but we do. So anyway, and how do I keep doing this? Is, for me, I need balance in my life. I cannot do this every single day. I need balance, and my balance consists of listening to music, working out, reading, and appreciate. This is a new one for me, appreciating and being thankful for what I have. And that, we'll get into this next subject about, is it hard to be happy? But first, the work makes me feel good about myself. And to answer Ray's question more directly, what does doing the work look like? And I found that it's unique to each individual as the trauma itself. And everybody is always talking about doing the work, and that's almost like a bad metaphor for me, because a few years ago, the big metaphor was mindfulness. And there was a cover of Time magazine that had a picture of a guy with his eyes closed and his brain exposed. And for some reason, that's supposed to illustrate what mindfulness is all about. And I wrote about mindfulness, and I found that what it means is you listen. And you really, truly, truly listen. You're not staring at somebody's eyes going, as soon as he's done talking, I'm going to say this. Or you don't say, I feel that way too. You truly just listen. And it's when I interviewed my family, I had a hard time just listening because I wanted to jump out of my chair. There were some things that were very disturbing to me, and I had to play the impartial third party and just listen, and that's what I did. So the metaphor, to doing the work for me is, if you want to run a marathon and you don't train at all, it's going to be really hard to run a marathon. So the first step for me with doing the work was learning how to own who I was. And that means I was learning to accept myself and everything about me. Now, from prior podcasts, that self-deprecation was a big part of my life. And self-loathing and self-deprecation were a big part of my life. So if I'm going to own who I am, I have to own that as well. I can run fast, I can jump high, I like this, I like that. It's a lot easier than it sounds to learn how to accept and love yourself. And for me, it was one of the two hardest things to do as I began the work. And beginning the work, officially I went to an impartial third party, a therapist, because I had no idea what to do and how to get out of this particular funk I was in for 40 plus years. And I learned that you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Because if you go to therapy and lie, you're wasting your time. If you're going to therapy and telling half-truths and blaming everybody else, you're truly wasting your time. And if you have a good therapist or someone you can talk to, they're going to call you on that right away. But if they don't know you well enough, it's real easy to lie. And the whole world's against me and all that other sort of thing. Again, you're wasting your time. And the next step for me, and I'm doing a quick overview here, is you have to learn how to forgive yourself. And I said it's those two things, learning to love yourself and learning to forgive yourself, are two of the hardest things. I wasn't used to doing that. Everybody was in line in front of me. When I went to the Warrior Weekend, that just gave me this flashback of we were in line and the guys in charge noticed that every time there was a line, I was last. And I went last. And this one guy called me out and he said, "Do you live your life like that?" And the answer was yeah. But until you actually are called out on it, you're shown that, you don't even realize it. I said this before about 80 times. When you're in this circle, when you're in this funk, you don't know how to get out of it. And you can be the smartest guy in the world, but you do not know. I had no idea how to stop doing or how to curtail this behavior until, here we go, I started doing the work. So through therapy, through reading, through educating myself in this area, and Ray and I actually talked about this not long ago. It's like every mind has a file cabinet, and I learned to be able to put things in files in my brain. And that way they were put somewhere, and I wasn't forgetting about them. I wasn't not dealing with them. I just had a place for them to go. And when it came time for that, like triggers or any other psychological terms that we've discussed or will discuss, I could pull them out without worrying about it. But I had to learn about triggers, to just go to a little subset here, because I said before, triggers just sneak up on you. They are psychological.
Let me stop you right there real quick. Are there specific types of therapy that helped you? Was it Gestalt? Was it Adlerian?
Gestalt was one of them. I always went to people, therapists, who had training in drug and alcohol addiction, because that addiction leads to other things, not so much maybe suicide, but family trauma. And if I went to someone who had no idea about any of the previous three, I wouldn't go anymore.
Can I follow up on that too? I know you have 4,000 notes there, but
No, just 6.
you're talking about the addictive behaviors. Addictive behaviors serve a purpose. What purpose were they serving in your life?
At first, they were the easy way out. So if I was afraid to hang around, if I was afraid of being insecure with friends or people I knew, alcohol and drugs were a bridge. I automatically would bond with those people. And in a sense, music was too, because I remember I went to the first couple of years in college. I learned all these new genres of music, and it helped me get in with all these new people. But what I think, in the beginning, it's the easiest way, are drugs and alcohol. And so after, I didn't do much of that in high school, but when we went to college, all bets were off. And I made a lot of friends. Let's go, nickel beer nights, dime beer nights, whatever there were, I would always be there. And we made friends with the juniors and seniors, and I was on top of my game then, I thought. And sports helped, because we were on all the intramural teams, and guys I hung around with the pretty good athletes, so we always did fairly well. So we would make friends through that. My roommate was on the baseball team, so I met those guys. But to answer your question more specifically, when you're first starting out, and I had no idea what I was trying to escape from, it was easy. You go to the liquor store and get a 12-pack, and then come home and tell funny stories to your roommates. And that was a real comfort zone for me, because I enjoyed being away from home.
What was the crossroad that came where you said, enough, this is not doing it for me? The self-medication, the hiding from it, the ease of it. What can you specify that moment?
Well, it was definitely a process. And I guess this can all be looked at as part of the healing process. There were times, the ISU story when I was a junior, in a room full of people and music's blasting, everybody's having a good time, and I said, something's wrong here. And then after I was married, and as I was married, a lot of my own dysfunction came out. And then after that, the divorce came. That was a real turning point. And I don't feel dependent on alcohol, because I have other things. I have this. I work out, I read, I have other interests. I still like to watch sports. I still like to do things that are not alcohol related. And I don't depend on it, to answer your question. I don't depend on any of that stuff anymore, because that's part of the healing process for me. Part of doing the work made me like myself more. And that, again, I know I said this before. When I first started doing this, and my therapist said to me, you sure you want to do this? You sure you want to open up Pandora's box? Because if you do it and you do it right, there's no turning back. And she was exactly right. I would fall into the self-sabotage, which we can get to, because it's funny. I was talking about this yesterday, and I ended, I think, the last podcast with this. When you're doing the work and you feel yourself start to change, I got to find a new cliche. When you're doing a lot of self-examining and self-discovery, you're leaving a big part of you. Well, I don't want to say leaving behind, but that part of you can't be a part of you anymore. And you can put that one in the file cabinet and then close the door. But if your usual response to a traumatic thing is a 12-pack, you got to find something else, or 10 joints, or whatever. And I started running. But I also had to learn in my 60s, which are closing out pretty soon. I have a term for the decade, and this was the decade of acceptance. when you learn sometimes there's absolutely nothing you can do, or you learn to quit beating yourself up. You accept yourself for who you are, and hopefully will be, because that's hard. I was a jerk from 25 to 35. I wasn't, but I'm just saying, you have to own that if you don't want to be a jerk anymore.
I don't know if we discussed this last time. I'll bring it up, and if we did, we can move on. But talk to us about the loneliness of getting better.
Well, as I started out, I had a lot of friends. I knew a lot of people. And these people knew me in a certain way. They knew he's Mike the Party Dude. Anytime when a lot of my friends got married and I wasn't, I was their night out because, the wife gave me Wednesday off. Come on, let's go. It almost killed me. It's exhausting when all your friends are married and you're not. And so as I started to make some changes, I was leaving that. Someone said you can never go to a different, when I was painting houses, you can't go to a different paint store because you won't get any work. You can't lose these friends you've had from high school on because you won't get any, you don't have any friends then. And that really scared me. And then you rotate the cycle of self-deprecation and self-loathing in that, it fits right in. So when I started to try to move away from those people, when I came back from the Warrior Weekend, I learned to hug men. So I started seeing guys that I've known for 10 years and hugging them, and they're like, they didn't know what to do. And I thought it was a great way to say hello to people. I still do that. And I learned it from them. Another friend of mine said, did you get taller when I came back from Warrior Weekend, because I was standing straight up, metaphorically and physically. So those few examples, you're leaving that now. That's your comfort zone. That's what you know. That's what everybody knows. And it's almost like you need to reintroduce yourself to that yourself and your surroundings. And that's scary because Ray and I have talked about this a zillion times. When you have conversations like this, if you're talking to someone who has no idea about I don't want to say mental health, about just getting better, they don't know what you're talking about. They don't want to know. So it's almost as if you're going, well, I had a great therapy session yesterday, and all you hear is crickets. They don't even know what to say to that. And I had a good one yesterday.
I know, I heard about it.
Yeah.
For an hour and a half. It was very... No, I'm not being facetious. After those sessions, I wish you could tape those sessions because those are podcasts in itself. It just opens up so many different doors for you, and all this stuff comes out that's in there. Not necessarily in order, but a lot of good things came out. And I was driving yesterday, so I couldn't pull over and take notes, but I've learned if and when you call, have the notebook out because you're going to say something that we need to touch on when we meet.
Thank you for that. Yesterday, I've been going to see the therapist for a long time. She's very good. Well, she's very good for me. So we're sitting there yesterday, and we're talking about some things. And she goes, for insurance purposes, I had to put down your diagnosis on the form. And I said, what do I have? And she goes, PTSD. And I almost fell off the couch. I go, no, I don't. And that's all I talk about. But the realization of diagnosing myself hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to go home and go to sleep. That's what happens to me when I get overwhelmed psychologically, emotionally, and intellectually. I have to sleep. So, and I still feel I didn't go through 2 red lights. I had to tell myself to pay attention 10 times on the way here because of what she said to me yesterday. And I don't even know how to explain that. But you talk about the original question, this is all part of it. This is 10 and 34 years later, after the initial therapy session I went to, which I still have the receipt from in my scrapbook, till now, if you're on this quest and stay on it, you never stop learning. And to me, it's very exciting. In a week or two, when my inside of my body calms down, I'll be really happy she told me that. because she tells me the truth. And that's another thing, when you're getting better. The metaphor is, say you don't drink for 2 weeks and then you think you're doing really well, and then you go to the bar, everybody's going to be happy you're drinking again. They're not going to be happy you're not drinking. And I said the heroin dealer will always be happy to see a heroin user, no matter whatever the hiatus was between the 2 visits. And what that is, I forgot my point. It's just that it's hard to make that change, and it's hard to stay with that change because you have to. I read something about a diet one time. Like if you eat 28 donuts when you're on a diet one day, don't worry about it. Everybody's going to have that. Just go back on your diet. So whenever I would fall self-sabotage, or I would fall into this self-loathing process I was in, now I know how to take a breather. I know how to step back and say, you don't feel good today. Go to the gym, read a book. I love reading sports books because they're almost like no-brainer books, and there's no philosophy or anything. And I enjoy that. And I take myself away, or else I'll watch Hogan's Heroes at night. I just need mindless things to kind of free what's up in there. So that is part of the whole learning about yourself. Being brutally honest,
owning it, and part of the work is therapy, and the style that fits your style. Because I'm sure if you go to a different therapist that has a different approach, it may not click at all.
So I just found it's funny. That truth is, you have to tell the truth, and. I told him, we were talking yesterday with my therapist. I go, if someone's leg hurts for 35 years, don't you want to know why it hurts? And the answer for a lot of people is no. I'll just stick with, because they're used to the leg hurting. What would I do if I could walk? And that's when all our subjects now fall into place with this validation, the great imposter, self-sabotage, because they all lead to the fact that when I got tired, I was exhausted. I needed validation. I needed someone in my life to say, way to go. And I also needed myself to believe that person when they told me, way to go. As far as leaving your friends and leaving your group, there's a movie called Almost Famous. And I've seen that movie 300 times. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch the movie. The kid gets in the store get in the car with this groupie girl who they're going to go to a party. And she said, this is going to be so great. We're going to meet all these rock stars and all this stuff. But she goes, if there's ever a day where you get lonely, go to the record store and see your friends. And that's how music has been to me. Music has been like my friend, and it never makes fun of me, and it never
doesn't judge you.
No,
it's always there.
It's just like a long time when I was drinking. The beer never yelled at me. The beer never said a word to me except, drink me while I'm cold, and that was it. And that's some of the reason. Getting back to the solace of drugs and alcohol, I never argued with a beer. Or, I'd get sick sometimes when I drank too much, but that would be the end of it. And it was all been a process. We can talk for, every time we can hit on this work thing and what I do to try to be better. And yesterday was another example. All this time later, you have PTSD. And I'm like, really? But now, in my heart just now, it's such a relief to know I have something. I wasn't making all this up.
You were able to put a name on it.
That's the key. And
there's not this nebulous feeling that's just floating around you like what.
Well, you can't explain it.
And then you end up looking in the mirror and say, what's wrong with me?
For 100 years, there's if you don't have a name for it, you can't explain it. I don't feel good today. Well, what, do you got, the flu? When I see this guy, he scares me. Well, you've never even talked to him. Well, that's part of hypervigilance. I'm a master in hypervigilance. But then I learned, too, that you're not always right. You can meet a guy and be completely, or a person, and just because his vibe is one, you can be completely wrong because that might not always be his vibe. And the other thing we were talking about, I guess, is why does getting better feel so lonely?
Yes.
Do you want to do that?
It's up to you. You have a number of topics you want to discuss today, and if you feel that's one of them, great. If not, I know the imposter was important.
It all leads into the great imposter because you're hiding this. You're even the fact that you're in therapy, you're going to groups, you're doing whatever you, because I went to Adult Children of Alcoholics, I went to Al-Anon, I went to all kinds of things. I went to suicide, after my sister-in-law committed suicide, we went to this group meeting and I went with my mom and all she did was complain the whole time. We never went again. And it was too soon. That was a tough one. But as far as feeling lonely when you get better is, I hit on it before, you're really used to acting and thinking a certain way. This is what I do. This is who I am. I'm the whatever you want to call it. And so again, self-deprecation, self-loathing becomes a way of life for me. My behavior dictated it. And now all of a sudden, I start liking myself. Now all of a sudden I say, hey, I was pretty good at this. Now what do? I don't know this new guy. And being this new guy is harder than being the old guy. And so there was a point in time when I was almost frozen. I didn't know who to be. So I had the warrior friends, and I had my high school friends and my college friends, and I could be this way with them and this way with them. And that's exhausting.
Almost like a chameleon. Whoever you were with,
it's exhausting.
Being them.
You know, I knew when I was painting, I got fired from a few jobs in my painting career. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It was just, this is where I was mentally when I was trying to paint somebody's house. It was really, really hard. Because not only do you get, like I said yesterday, I went to sleep after I got home from my therapist. I was exhausted mentally all day long, and I was making really stupid mistakes. And then that's where, again, now we're overlapping. That's where the self-sabotage comes in. I'm working at a $3 million house in Highland Park, and I'm acting like I don't know how to paint a ceiling because I was just so tired. And again...
physically, emotionally, which were you tired? Or both?
Emotionally is the most tiresome. And intellectually is...
They say a day of worry is worse than a week of work.
I've never experienced the tired feeling I had when I got home from teaching all day, intellectually. And then I was never as tired as I was physically when I painted. And when I owned my own company, I had to do both. And if the bid was off, or if something wasn't working out, then it's all my fault because I did the bid. And that's going to happen. I didn't know the ceiling was going to fall down. Because when I looked at it, it looked fine, that sort of thing. Moving away from who I was very, very difficult, which I just said. I swear to God, people didn't know who I was. All of a sudden, I'm arguing. All of a sudden, I'm not the drunk guy in the corner anymore. And
standing up for yourself?
Oh, yeah, it was huge. It was huge. What do you mean? What are you talking about? And all that, and then speaking to people like we're speaking right now, like I'm talking in a foreign language. They don't understand. And then I found out yesterday with some conversations I've had since Monday, they don't want to understand, and that's fine. That's fine. That's not their deal. And what the other thing was, how much longer can I hang around with someone like Ray? How much longer can I hang around with the woman that we met 3 Thursdays ago without them finding out about who the real me is? Because I was still trying to find that real me guy. And when I taught high school and I go back and look at kids, I can't imagine how hard it is sometimes to be a kid. Because you have to be all these things. And your life is on television, in essence, with all the social media. You're on a radio talk show 24 hours a day. And I'm teleporting myself back then. I would have made it, but it would have been, holy cow. I can't, my daughter went to school with 10 beautiful. They went to Carmel High School in Mundelein. They were all Barbies. They were beautiful, and every single one of them said, "I'm fat and I'm ugly," because that's the age group they're in. So I didn't mean to get off subject, but that's why I feel like what we talk about is universal. There is no age limits, because at some time in your life, for some people it's more, and I know it's more for me now because I have PTSD. And it was funny because how shocking is that? Every time Ray and I talk, and we talk about some new thing, I have 6 out of 7 symptoms. I have 5 out of 8. And Ray tells me the other day, "You're such an easy read." I go to my therapist, "You know what Ray said?" And she goes, "What?" "Then I'm an easy read." And she goes, "You are." So that was that.
That's why I read the psychological stuff, because when I used to fly for other things that I did, I would read these medical journals, and by the time we landed, I had the disease. No matter what it was,
I know.
I had it.
I hate that.
So I just said, enough of that. Let's just go more this way. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, those 2 questions are a precursor for the imposter syndrome, for validation, and for self-sabotage, because I have them listed in order, and we can talk about that. But one thing bad about the imposter syndrome, I'm going to read it. It's the feeling that everyone else knows exactly what they're doing but you. And you have this fear people around you are going to figure out that you don't know what you're talking about and expose you as a fraud. Never a truer statement. And how I overcame that is I read that book by Jeff Bridges and the Zen guy in New York. And it was the Zen philosophy according to the Big Lebowski. If you've ever seen that movie, go watch it right after you see Almost Famous. And all he says is, if you're not good at something, all it means is you need more practice. I never looked at it that way. I just automatically sucked. You know, if I played tennis and I couldn't hit the ball over the net, I suck at tennis. Did it matter that I never played tennis before? I never saw it through those eyes. So that's what's dangerous about the great imposter syndrome. And it can turn into a cycle with serious negative consequences. And by recognizing it, this is all part of what we talked about before. That's how this all intermingles. By recognizing it, you can do something about it. Everybody's in the same boat. I told Ray, when I started getting my doctorate, I really thought I was out of my league intellectually. And I even told the teacher that I can't do this. And I said this before. He said, "Sit down and shut up." And it was the greatest advice I ever got in my life. But as I went up the educational food chain, it's really funny what you perceive in your head that's not true. Just like when I started teaching high school, I go, "Oh, these guys are all Einsteins," and they weren't. So anyway, what else you got for me, Bub?
Are you happy with your discussion of those 3? Because
Yeah.
I think those are pretty detailed.
Yeah.
I always give you a question that I never tell you beforehand. A
Please
question
do.
or 2. So, what does your soul need?
What does my soul need?
What does your soul need?
You know, a validation comes to mind. I wrote about what makes me happy, and that's what my soul needs. My grandchildren make me happy. My daughter and my wife make me happy. I don't live in the past, but I've had a lot of fun, and I've been to a lot of great places. I worked for the airlines right out of college. We flew to California. I saw all these concerts in California. I went to Ireland with the Bears in 1997 and played golf in Ireland and all that sort of thing. And I look back at that, and I don't live in the past. It just makes me happy I was able to have that. And in this work makes me happy. So I think happiness feeds my soul. And what makes me happy are the 4 things, and I even wrote about a Sheryl Crow song. If it makes you happy, why are you so sad? But that's a bad metaphor. that's what makes me happy. And I like my life. What makes me happy is the way my life is right now. It's better than it's ever been. It's because of what we're doing. And all the places, all the sporting events, all the great concerts, all the wonderful people I've met and continue to know. And I also like telling stories. And I know Ray likes telling stories because they're funny. And they bring back an isolated moment that was really funny or embarrassing, but then it becomes funny. Because a friend of mine said, tragedy plus time equals comedy. And it's kind of like that.
That was that lady that we met 3 weeks ago. Boy, she pinned my ears back when she asked me just one question, and it's like, how did you know?
That one, yes.
I very nervous with that one.
I reference Glory Days by Bruce Springsteen. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
High school wasn't the best time of my life. It was a part of my life. I had a great time.
Oh, I just dislike when people say high school's the best years of your life.
It's a shame if you say that.
I've, with my grandson popping up almost a year ago now, August 30th, it's just phenomenal just to watch him grow and do things. It's the simple stuff too. I heard this is way off subject, I think, but what the hell is my podcast? I heard
our podcast.
Our podcast. I heard Elton John introduce Leon Russell to the Music Hall of Fame. He gave a really good speech, and they played that song. A song for you.
Yeah.
About all the things he did, and
yeah.
That was important. It was important. I refereed college football. It was important. I was a boxing ref. I was doing all the other stuff, but I always said, take away my wife, my kids, and my dog, I'd be miserable.
That's 5 or 6 podcasts ago, I referred to my financial situation in my life, which has nothing to do with nothing. I was always pretty happy. I didn't feel the need. I never saw myself being happy because I made more money. I got so much gratification out of teaching. And when I go back to those Weber golf outings, this kid came up to me. I taught him 40 years ago. And he goes, someone said that used to go in the boys' bathroom at break time and catch them smoking and steal their cigarettes. I go, probably, because I was young and I thought it was very disrespectful that they would smoke in the bathroom right next to my class and at least not try to hide it. Yeah. Look, there's a fire in the bathroom. So I would wait a few minutes after the bell rang, give them a chance to light up, and I'd catch them all every time. And I was just really, he told me that after 40 years. He remembers that. And the point is that it's wonderful that that's what you remember. And that Friday was Current Events Day. I talked about that last time, and we did commercials in my class, and they still talk about the commercials. These guys are 50 years old. And that was, and again, not living in the past, but I'm talking about the greatest gratification I've gotten in my life from work. This is one of them. Painting certain jobs was another one, but teaching.
And the connections you make. There's a great book by a Harvard professor called Connections, and that just hits me so well. I'm looking across the table at one of my favorite people of all time. Just the connections that you make and what you can talk about. The other day, I went to have something done to my car. 45 minutes later, I had the entire life story, and my heart just went out to this guy who's making a lot of money, who's not happy.
Yes.
Beautiful wife. Who I want to get in a podcast, and I think she went to Barrington, I'm not sure. And I'm looking across at the podcast director right now. But she worked with cancer, people who were dying of cancer for the longest time. And she just transferred over to bone marrow and palliative medicine, the step before you go to hospice and go home. Because I want to see how she handles it. You go to work every day. I did this one summer. And another story. Are we going too long?
We're at 40.
40? Getting my master's years ago, over 40 years ago, Northeastern had a very unique program where we could pick 5 or 7 areas to go to in the summer. We had to have one summer off. So I went to Alcoholics Anonymous, domestic violence. I went to all those. And then there was one, children who were dying. I said, that should be pretty cool. I'll go, and being the clown that I am, I had my clown outfit, and we did animals. I had a ball, and I had everything, and it was the most interesting week. But I had to miss the first day, which was the training, which is another message for somebody: don't miss, pay attention. So I missed the first day. We go through Friday. Little Billy, this kid is the biggest pain in the neck ever, but he was funny. He would just crack me up. And his birthday was Monday. So I want to surprise him, go to get him an ice cream cake, the whole deal. I show up Monday. Where's Billy? He's not here. All right, well, is he coming tomorrow? Where's Billy? He's gone. Where'd he go? Did they move? Didn't click me. The poor kid died Sunday afternoon. My God, I learned more from that week there. And then I went out to my car. I cried like an old man who just lost his farm or whatever. But it was one of the best learning experiences for me to see that and experience that. And then that got me going into the grief counseling, going into the bereavement, going into understanding trauma. Because, and again, I point to my former student over there who doesn't look 14 anymore. Kids need to know those answers, and they need to help develop those own strategies. Yes. And that's what I think we're doing here with the podcast. We're giving people the strategies that we know have worked for us. And they can try it. If it doesn't work for them, great. They may not like Gestalt therapy. That's too confrontational. They may like Adlerian, where you just talk forever. Or,
I know people who went to don't drink anymore and didn't go to AA. They didn't want to go to AA. And it was funny. We're talking about loss, and we've never got to the 7 stages of grieving, which are someday. But,
we'll get to those in December.
Yeah, but there's a thing called ambiguous loss I've learned, and ambiguous loss is if you the Bears game was on last night. And Steve McMichael is dying. He's got ALS, and he's a former Bears player in the big glory days, and now he's a mere shadow of himself. But when you get ALS, you die. And I watched her interview last night. I go, that's really got to be hard because she's watching this guy die for a year. And then I read about ambiguous loss last night and how difficult that's a whole other ballgame.
We'll get to that. We'll be taking a week or two off, but we'll come back to that with those different types of losses and explanations because I think those are very, very important.
Well, they are. But you're right about switching this up and maintaining a balance. About this isn't a different subject, well, it's a different avenue because you can be okay. And I never, ever, ever use the word journey because I hate that word and I hate mindfulness and doing the work. I try to find my own little metaphors for things. And when you're trying to get better, you got to tell yourself it's a process. If you're trying to lose 100 pounds, you're not going to lose 100 pounds in a day. Right. And so if you fall down, get back up and keep going. And this is truly a guide for whoever wants it.
For now, that's it. See you soon. Leave you with one thought. Be kind to each other. That's all that matters. Have a good weekend. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.